Now, which one's the old one? The new one?
Really?
Well, the one that he's holding.
Oh, this is the new one. This is the old one, obviously.
That's the new one.
No, this one.
Oh, that's the new one.
That's the new.
Oh,
yes,
the one,
that's not attached.
I like it. It changes it, but it doesn't.
What's up, guys? Danielle here, NeutralSupport.net. So, way back in 2021, Park Tool comes out with the DAG 3. Now, that is the most recent iteration of their derailleur hanger alignment gauge. The biggest change they've made in 35 years of that tool is that the post rotates 90 degrees so that you can avoid the stay, but leave the indicator in place so that the measurement stays the same. Wildly increases the accuracy because who still has those little rubber bands they put on the original one? Like, just not a system that actually worked, whereas this system, the new one, would be great, amazing.
I don't need it! I don't need it!
They're not the first people to do that, right? That's not like a super incredible idea, but it's a great iteration on that tool and a big change from that time.
I need it!
So of course I was like, absolutely. And I threw my derailleur hanger alignment gauge in the bin. So I log in to order it. I see that it's $128 and then I log back out because who has $128 to spend on a tool that they already have? Which made me start to think, this is the most ubiquitous derailleur hanger tool. You see them all over the place. So it's kind of a shame that you just have to kind of chuck this piece to get the new one. And the only change in the new one is that this thing rotates 90 degrees. But it did still bother me that the 90-degree rotation would be such a big time saver, and it would be worth having because it would save enough time that that would translate into money. I'm always talking about that. You can buy a tool for whatever reason you want. But if you need a justification to buy a tool, make sure that the change is saving you time, thus making you money, or something to that effect. So that brought along the, if only there were a solution to this problem. And it turns out there is. Let's go.
Buckle up, suckers.
So in today's bicycle world, as mechanics, we basically assume that a derailleur will be bolted to something like a hanger. There are a few notable exceptions, like SRAM's transmission that bolts right to the axle. Shimano actually tried direct mount in the early 2000s with their Hone group set that they really couldn't get it to take off. So actually, if you look at this derailleur, it was meant to be a direct mount derailleur. But when Shimano really tried to get direct mount to take off, they couldn't get manufacturers on board with making compatible frames or manufacturing hangers on their frames that would then bolt to direct mount. So direct mount at that point was kind of a misnomer because you still just bolted the derailleur to a standard hanger on a frame. But aside from direct mount, really, most derailleurs have been the same since the 50s. So in the 30s, when people were trying to solve the problem of shifting gears without getting off the bike, the first derailleurs were very different. The hanger did not actually exist yet. So a derailleur looked more like an Oscar Super Champion, where the pulley actually hung down from the bottom bracket to tension the chain, and the back was just a literal rectangular fork that scooted the chain side to side that was operated by a cable. But from the Oscar, in the 50s, Simplex started to come on the scene, and Simplex derailleurs bolted onto an actual hanger. The hanger was typically built into the frame because frames were steel at that point. So when a hanger bent, you actually were bending the piece of the frame back, not a replaceable piece. So it wasn't until we got alloy frames in the 90s that replaceable hangers came onto the scene, and now we have like 500 different shapes of this piece to replace when they go bad. So it makes sense that the 50s roll around, we start bolting derailleurs to the frame, and immediately there's a problem. That when you fall on that side, the hanger gets bent. And I'm sure that the first solution to that wasn't get a fancy tool, but it was more like grab a wrench and grab it, grab the derailleur itself, use something to bend it back. But it wasn't very long after derailleurs started to exist and hangers started to exist that Campy came out with their derailleur hanger tool. It was 1955, so they're very early to the game. Their tool was very similar to what we see now in that it had a threaded piece that bolted on. The only difference was instead of having a moving indicator, it actually had just a curved handle so that you could see relative distance as opposed to actually physically measuring it. It's hard to look without the internet being in existence, but it really doesn't seem like they had a competitor for that tool for a really long time. I'm sure that there were, But if I look back at old catalogs, I couldn't find derailleur hanger alignment tools from basically any other company that we actually recognize today. So believe it or not, Park Tool didn't come out with the DAG 1 until the 90s. So you see a tool that looks very similar to this come onto the market and is the first major branded tool that has an actual indicator that you can measure the distance of the bend and make those adjustments. So it's a real game changer at that point. It was a big deal. Park Tool was super accessible to the bike mechanic, being one of the only major tool companies available in the United States. So of course they took market share. And they basically held that market share until around 2015. Now I'm sure there were competitors and other things and people coming out with tools like this, but really the Park Tool was ubiquitous in the shops because it had such a long tenure of being basically the only accessible option. So you really do see them everywhere. The current landscape is much different, but if you look at their competitors at the time, the first real competitor was ABBEY, who didn't come out with their HAG, their hanger alignment gauge, until 2015. Not to mention that, for example, the current going rate of a DAG 2.2, the similar version to this, is $85, whereas a HAG is $205. So the accessibility portion of the tools was also a factor. Even the DAG 3 that we talked about at the beginning, $128, much cheaper than the ABBEY. You have tools like Dave at BSC has made, where he actually made his own HAG tool that actually looks really nice, that uses aluminum extrusion. So the landscape today has shifted dramatically with tools. There are choices on the market if you need a tool. So if you don't have a tool at all, there are lots of good choices, and you actually have more choices now than we did in the past. But if you're a person who just has one of these around, which is a lot of people, how do you make this tool even better? So there are actually improvement options now where you can take the functionality of the DAG 3 and implement it on your original DAG 1 or DAG 2. So the idea of having a rotating indicator is not new, and the idea of 3D printing parts for a derailleur hanger tool also not new. So if you look at Thingiverse, which is like a big ecosystem of things you can print on a 3D printer, there are already derailleur hanger tools starting in 2017 where people were printing parts, making their own tools. Pretty cool. Also in 2017, you have Goathead Bike Company making a mostly 3D printed hanger tool for travel because it made it so significantly light. So the idea of 3D printing parts is not new. The idea of rotating the indicator is not new, but the fusion of those things into an old tool that you already have is relatively new. So when I first started thinking about this problem, I really just wanted to be able to turn the indicator 90 degrees, which seemed simple enough, but of course I wanted it to be really fancy. So my first ideas were more about a nesting turn, which I really liked the idea, but in practice, it just didn't seem to work. So it evolved from this sort of rudimentary block to this sort of rudimentary block where it was actually nesting in a square. Again, challenging with the spring tension and that kind of stuff. So that really got me back to the idea that it just needed to be simple, because simple was actually better and more sexy in the long run, even though having it be spring loaded was part of my original goal. So I was able to go from this very, very rudimentary block to this design relatively quickly, and it is very simple. So once I got here, I was actually able to use the tool, and I didn't realize until the moment that I could actually use it how important this was going to be in my life. So the ability to move this out of the way when you're trying to go past a stay, turns out, was something that I didn't even realize that I was missing all that well. I know I have an ABBEY because you've seen it, but I have multiple tool sets, so the ABBEY wasn't always just the thing that was right there, right? In the shop, typically it was the Park tool. The ABBEY was small, so it was in the travel kit. And I didn't have enough money to just buy a bunch of ABBEYs to put in all my tool kits, so I really did end up using this tool a lot. The ability to just rotate that out of the way just made all the sense in the world, and really, like, how much time I probably wasted over the course of a decade using this tool to align derailleur hangers. So after I decided that this was important, I made some changes to make it actually stand up to being thrown around and used daily. So these were actually threaded right into the material. I'm not a super trusting person when it has to hang on to any kind of plasticky material. So I wanted to make sure that those threads were going to be there forever. So I did captive nuts for each of the threaded portions, and I actually made knobs as opposed to using the adjusters that I was using. So I think it turned out great. It works well. It's pretty easy to install. And there you go. So it flips out of the way so that you can get past the stay, and then when you're done, you flip it back. And you know that you're in the right place because you actually get to a stop. So Chris at CMH Printed Designs actually beat me to the punch by a lot and put out his FlipDAG last summer, which is a retrofitted tool just like this that slides onto your old DAG 1 and DAG 2. So I don't actually have a DAG 1 to verify measurements, so I'm not sure. This definitely is a DAG 2 retrofitted tool. I'm actually kind of excited that I didn't know about his tool because I had a lot of fun making this, and I feel like if I had seen his in the process of making mine, that I would have probably quit. It's always fun to see how two different people will approach a problem and come out with solutions. Based on looking at his website and looking at the video, I believe his 90-degree turn, as opposed to having a stopper, is actually a keyhole design so that it turns within itself. And I believe he uses threaded inserts as opposed to captive nuts. They both effectively do the same thing. And also, Dave at BSC actually took a note from Chris's FlipDAG and created his own. Funnily enough, once he decided to make a derailleur hanger tool, he used that flip technology that he had made to incorporate into his new tool. So now he has a cool derailleur hanger tool that he offers. Chris offers his retrofit for the 90-degree turn. I have a retrofit for a 90-degree turn. So there's a lot of good options out there. So when we talk about the range of pricing, you can spend $205 on the nicest derailleur hanger tool that you'll ever touch. The way that they accomplish moving out of the way of the stay is you can actually rotate the entire tool. Feels great, the machining is nice, it's very compact. This actually stores in the handle so that you can pack it really easily, which is why I had it. It's actually my to-go derailleur hanger tool. You can spend $128 on the new DAG 3, get the flipping capability, get the lighter weight, more accurate, get the measurements on the rod, just like the ABBEY tool. You can spend $130 and get the BSC derailleur hanger tool. That tool actually has aluminum extrusion so that it's perfectly square at all times, no play. You can buy a 2.2 and get the same old, the tool that you're used to, with the traditional style with no turning for $85, or you can spend $20 to $30 buying a retrofitted 90-degree flipper for your existing DAG if you already have it, and get all that functionality, greatly improve your life, and not have to spend a bunch of money. An extra $100 is a lot of pizza.
These are exactly what you need, but you don't have to take my word for it.
So thank you for watching. I hope that you found this at least a little entertaining, if not very informative. If you still have a DAG and you just want to upgrade it and you don't want to spend a bunch of money on a new tool, check out mine, check out Chris's. I'm going to link to his in the description as well. If you don't have a derailleur hanger tool at all, I'm going to try to link to all the ones that I talked about in this video. I'd say at this point, I wouldn't get one that you can't move the indicator out of the way, just because the accuracy you gain is tangible, but also the time you save by not having to fiddle with the tool is, my first impression was just, that is the difference. That's amazing. Check out neutralsupport.net. We've got swag, hats, aprons. I've got other tools, memberships to help support the channel, because I really do appreciate it. Like, I really like making these videos, and I'm just overwhelmed with how supportive you guys have been. So thank you very much. And as always, I hope you have a good day.